Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Chatting with You. I'm Giselle Urbina.
I'm Michael Urbina.
And today we're going to talk about being a boss. I think we both have that role here at the Urbina Law Firm, and we would like to share with you a couple of insights on how we do it.
Yeah. So I'll start off with sharing the fact that I guess everybody talks about wanting to be their own boss or work for themselves. I can share with you that that was always my worst nightmare, like working for myself, because I feared it to no end. The idea of being your own boss to me was terrifying. Not because I don't know. It's just a lot of things, a lot of different reasons why it would scare me. And now being in a leadership role in the firm is kind of, interesting that I actually ended up doing exactly what I said I would never do or I feared the most.
I think that's funny because you've been the leader on many things, like on youth groups and like at your schools. And I just think it's funny that you really fear being your own boss when you're like such a good leader.
Absolutely terrified. Still to this day, sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I'm doing it right. I hope I'm doing it right. I think I'm doing it right. But yeah, it's probably my worst fear aside from birds. Birds terrify me. They're just overall no good. But I think being a boss is something it's an interesting topic in general, not just for me, because I think a lot of people have the wrong stereotype or misconception, or I think a lot of people do it wrong, like really wrong. They don't understand what really involves being a quote unquote boss, and that's why a lot of times I think a lot of companies go through so much turnover because they don't do it right. And it's baffling to me how people can't see, that they're doing it wrong.
Yeah. And it's funny because I feel like you and I have examples of this, and probably everybody else who's listening right now. We all have that job where you said, oh my God, I hate my boss. I don't like him. I know we all have an experience, or at least most people have an experience with having a bad boss. And I feel like it's something that can be fixed or improved. I feel like not everyone is born to do it. I feel like sometimes people are put in positions of leadership when they shouldn't have. But at the end of the day, leaders are not born, they're made. And I think that's something you can actually learn to be.
I agree. I think, like you said, some people are not meant to be there or have the proper capacity or capabilities or skills. But I think that certain people that have maybe like the minimum level of skills to be a leader or a boss or, supervisor, whatever you want to call it, it is something that can be learned. It is something that you can improve. Mm-hmm. It is something you can learn from your mistakes and actually get better at. But again, I think there's such a bad stereotype about the boss or the horrible boss, like the movies, But it's just a lot of people do it wrong, and they don't see that there's a different aspect of being a boss that goes far beyond ordering people around or cutting costs or doing all these things. Like there is an actual human logic that goes into it that you need to follow and comprehend in your group and the culture that you create in your company to make sure that it works and that you are considered a good boss. So when you get that world's greatest boss cup, which by the way, I don't have one, just saying, but it would be nice. But you feel like you actually earn it, not just because people are saying, oh, he's a great boss. Like you want to feel like the people that you work with are actually happy and fulfilled and they're doing a good job for the business that you're running or the department that you're running or whatever it is.
I agree. And I want to say a disclaimer. We're not the best bosses in the world, but we're pretty good. But, we still have a lot to learn. But I feel like over the years, we have improved. And I feel like we can share some of our experiences or tips regarding that so other people can also improve.
I think, to piggyback on what you said, you never stop learning in anything you do. Like whether you're an immigration lawyer, husband, father, son, everything in life, you have to adapt or die kind of thing. Like you have to understand that you're not always going to know everything. Nobody knows everything. The world we live in is in a constant change. So if somebody sits there and tells you, I know everything there is to know about this, do you?
That's not true.
Like, do you? There's still all these discoveries happening around about space and medicine and science and law changes. Like, I mean, you can't sit there and say you know everything about everything. You might be very well versed, but that doesn't mean that you know everything. And the minute you stop being curious about what you love doing or what you're doing and learning better ways to do it, I think that's when your decline starts happening. Like the day you stop being curious about learning more about what you do, that's it.
That's true.
Like, you're done. You know?
Because it's always going to be somebody else learning something new, improving, learning new techniques, and you are staying behind because you are like, oh, I know everything.
Correct.
So I agree.
Yeah. So I think in terms of being a boss or being supervisor, whatever you want to call it, leader, the first thing you have to understand is that everyone you work with are people just like you. Because I think a lot of people feel like they leave power or whatever you want to call it, like get to their head, and then they forget that, you know, you have to work your way up to get to that position. You have to work hard to get to that position. Like, you have to empathize with the people that you work with. Like, you have to understand that to them, you know, let's say like you start a business, to you that business is life. To that employee, that's a job. They just want to make their keep, you know, and then go home, unless you make them invested in your business. You make them feel like the business is their own. You make them understand that when the business is successful, you're successful. And I think that's where the first part where I think a lot of people or a lot of bosses, quote unquote, get it wrong. They don't make people feel, you know, invested in especially if it's a small business or a small firm or whatever. People don't feel invested, so they don't feel like they really need to go the extra mile for anything. So it's a vicious cycle. The employee doesn't feel like they need to do anything extra. Then the boss is like, look at him, they're not doing anything extra. Why would I give them a raise or this and that? But because you are the boss, it's your job to make that happen. If there's like a dispute between you and your employee, as the boss, you're the one that needs to like take the steps to, you know, manage that relationship. Like, it all comes back to you. So you need to be the driver in pretty much everything, you know? So you can't just sit there, like if you had a spat with your friend and be like, oh, I'll wait until she comes back. If there's a work environment as the quote unquote boss, like that's on you to go fix that or start the movement is fix that. And that's, I think people don't get that empowerment part of making sure that people feel invested in the business, people understanding how their job is important. And then that's when you start getting a lot of conflicts where people are like, oh, they had an attitude problem, that's why I had to fire them. So,
and I love what you said, that you need to remember they're people. People like us, they go through good times and bad times. They get sick. If they have kids, sometimes they have school things they have to go, just like us. I feel like sometimes bosses are like, well, I can come in late and leave early and I can go to all this stuff because I'm the boss and I can do whatever. Yes, technically, but remember that your employees also have kids and also have spouses and also get sick. They also go through life just like you. So you need to be more understanding when obviously you cannot like let them abuse, right? Like have them take a whole month when they don't have it, or, you know, when there's not a special circumstance. But you need to be understanding that sometimes they are going to get sick. Sometimes they're going to have to take a day or half a day to take their kids to the dentist. Or, you know, maybe they have a field trip and they really, really want to go. And, you know, you need to be understanding when it's appropriate to also let them live their life and work together. And trust me, I feel like in my experience, when you give an employee something they didn't have or they were not expecting, like let's say they used all the vacation they had for the year, but they really wanted to make this trip to see their family, for example, and you say, you know what, you can take an extra day, that's fine. When you give that extra thing to them, it's so big, they're gonna work 10 times harder for you because you gave them that. Because for you it might be just one day, for them it's like an amazing gift. Because it's something you're giving them that they didn't have and that you didn't have to give them. So I feel like understanding that they are people just like you, it's number one.
Yeah. Well, like you said, let's put that same example. Let's say somebody wants to go on a cruise and they go up to you and you tell them no. During that whole time up to the cruise and during the cruise, how productive do you think they'll be? Probably not very productive. They're upset. They may not have the time. I completely get that. But they're like, oh, they'll be bummed out. So their productivity is going to go down. Their speed in doing things is going to go down. Reverse it. You tell them yes. You value them. You do an exception for this person. And then guess what? That time before they leave, they're going to be working their butt off. One, because they want to make sure that everything's right before they leave. Or two, because they're so thankful for what you did that, they're going to leave, their back hanging out there just to make sure that everything is done right. And again, old school of doing things would have been like, nope, you are over vacations, move along, blah, blah, blah. And that's why people are like, oh, well, that's how it is at all points. But then as time goes, businesses change. They change their packages. They do this, they do that. They go through different management styles. And studies show that a happy person in their job is far more productive than an unhappy person. So why would you not do anything possible to make sure that your employee is happy? Granted, you can't be, making those selections all the time. But there's a lot of times that I think people are ruthless with their employees or coworkers when if they were a little nicer about certain circumstances or if they had given that extra inch, it probably would have been a lot better all around for everybody involved.
I agree.
So I think the other thing with regards to being a boss is the value. I think a lot of times people see employees or, staff in general as an expense. You got to see it as an investment. I think you got to do it the other way around. If you find good people, generally people are like, oh, this person was amazing, but they wanted XYZ amount of salary. Well, do you think that person's going to be that amazing and productive at that position that they could, cover their salary and then some? Or is that somebody who's going to be like dead weight kind of thing? And people that make that distinction, they just want to keep, wages down just to make sure that they can keep costs down, but they don't think about the increased productivity that maybe a little bit of an extra oomph and salary can take somebody to the next level. That's where I think a lot of people get it wrong and they don't see it that way. And it's to this day. Sometimes I talk to people about this. They're like, no, because you have to take this into account and that into account. I'm like, it still doesn't change the outcome. Still doesn't change the human aspect of it.
I agree.
So I think that valuing your employees is a key aspect of making sure that you are considered a good boss. The other thing is in terms of, just overall interaction with your employees, that you need to show them that you're human too. Because I used to think of teachers like people that would sleep in their schools or people that what they did was go home and come up with terribly difficult homework assignments to give us just to make sure that we're busy. No, they're just people too. They just have a job to do, like that has nothing to do with whether they are a nice person or not. But unfortunately, when you're little, all you see is what you want to see.
Exactly. Another thing, talking about kind of like that, I feel like people, when an employee does something wrong, bosses are usually very quick to say, you did this wrong, you have to correct it. But when they do something right, it doesn't happen the same way. I feel like you need to be like, you have to have a balance. Yes, you as a boss are responsible for the outcome of the work and you have to make sure it's done right. So if there's a mistake, you have to correct it. However, if the person is on the other side doing things right, you have to like make sure that you let them know, because people are like, oh, well, that's what they're supposed to do in the first place. That's why I don't really have to say anything. I'm paying them for it. No, we're humans. Like, we like also positive feedback to make sure that we, that we show them that we care, make sure we're doing the right thing. And that positive feedback can go a really long way. I feel like that's something that we try to do here and that really has worked for us.
Yeah. And I think also like giving them praise when it's due. A lot of times people don't give, praise where it's due in terms of like their performance or ability to do whatever the task might have been. I mean, if you're not giving someone positive feedback, only negative, like, you think they're going to be happy? Like, no way. If you're only coming up to them with negative stuff, You have to give them props when they do something right too. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
you'll get very unhappy employees.
Yep. The other thing we do here at the firm, that maybe not everyone is going to be, you know, not everyone is going to agree on, is that we only micromanage when we have to.
Mm-hmm.
So I do not like micromanaging anyone. Like, I really don't like it. I rather explain the person what they have to do, train them, give them all the resources. You go ahead and manage your time, manage everything you have to do. So that's more of a macro management aspect. But there's sometimes that you really have to. There's problems. You have to really look more in depth, and I definitely support micromanaging someone. But other than that, I rather just let them be themselves. I feel people are more productive because they're not being like so looked upon.
Overstressed and
yeah, I feel like people do better that way.
I agree. So I think the stereotypes of bosses being hard and terrible and yelling at people, like, I think that's just generally what people think. But a boss has the opportunity to basically like make sure that all his employees get along, but more importantly, that they have the right procedures and the right culture set. So no matter if somebody decides to leave or whatnot, that culture you set with those initial recruits, if you want to put it that way, that culture remains intact. You don't allow anybody to touch that culture that you've spent so much time setting up in your company. And that part as a boss is probably one of the most crucial ones. Like, how do I put someone to do the job that we have with making sure that that person is solid at what we need them to do, which is, work together in our scenario to make sure that all the products that we send out and all the services and briefs and paperwork that we send out is correct to the best of our ability. So,
yeah, I agree. Something else we do, we have to be the example, right? So something else I feel like bosses don't really do is like when they make a mistake, they don't really admit it. They try to hide. They try to show the employee that you're so perfect. Something I do when I correct someone, and I have done the same mistake, I admit it. I'm like, so you did this wrong. Let me let you know I've done this wrong, and this is how I fixed it, and make sure that it's not going to happen again. So I feel like if you own up to your own mistakes, you're showing them, hey, they're human too. I can improve. I have the chance. But if you show them that you are the absolute best thing in the world and that you do not make any mistakes, then how can they even try to come up, if they don't have an example to follow? I feel like we need to be the example for them in many things, right? So
I agree. So do you have any other last thoughts on this topic?
I feel like we've covered pretty much everything. A good summary of how we do things. Like we said at the beginning, we have to improve every day, right? We have to keep learning. We're not the absolute best, but I feel like we have a good culture and we have learned over the years on different things and they have worked for us. So just happy to share them with you guys.
Yeah. So that concludes another Chatting With You episode. Feel free to find us on podcasts, Spotify, and all these other podcast platforms. It's Chatting With You. So that's chatting with the letter U. Okay. Only the letter U. Okay. So if you have any ideas on topics that you want us to discuss, feel free to send us a message. Other than that, thank you so much for your attention, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.
Have a good one.